They say the first snow always falls when a lie is exposed. That winter, the snow came early. It fell heavy on the rooftops of Rose Ridge, a wind-lashed town where secrets traveled faster than truth. Somewhere between the mountains and the barren road, Clara Belle Walker stepped off the last westbound train with only a suitcase, a pair of scuffed boots, and a baby bundled in wool. She wasn't supposed to return, not after what happened, not after she disappeared. She walked down Main Street with her shoulders square, but her eyes on the dust, refusing to meet the faces peeking behind curtains or pretending not to stare. The baby, no more than 6 months old, whimpered in her arms. She whispered soft things into the child's ear, names of rivers, of lullabies she half remembered, of dreams she hadn't yet dared to dream. Behind her, someone spit. She came back after what she did? Carrying his baby? Clara didn't flinch, not when the grocer turned away, not when the pastor's wife crossed to the other side of the street. There was no place for her in Rose Ridge, not anymore. Her name had been scraped off the church roster. Her family's homestead had been sold. Even a father, who once called her his golden girl, had sent a letter saying only, "You're no daughter of mine now." So Clara headed west. The ad was pinned in the post office. Help needed. Morning and evening milkins. Room and board. Whisper and Rock Ranch. Inquire within. She rode in the back of a feed truck, her baby wrapped tight in second-hand quilts, all the way to the Canyonlands where the wind moved differently. Older, maybe. Wiser. The ranch was silent when she arrived. A vast, empty horizon. Earth red as dried blood. Wind stirring the dust like whispers. A single man stood by the barn. He was tall, with hair braided down his back and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his eyes. He didn't speak at first, just looked at the woman before him, thin, worn, holding a child like she was made of glass. "You're late," he said at last, voice low as thunder in the distance. "Snow," Clara replied. He glanced at the baby, then back at her. "You any good with cows?" "I was raised on a farm." He nodded, then turned. "You start tomorrow." No handshake, no smile. Just a man with a silence thicker than stone, and a past he didn't offer. That night, Clara sat in a cabin the size of her father's old hay shed, lit only by an oil lamp. The baby, Elias, slept curled against her side. From the window, she saw the ranch owner moving between the horses, feeding, checking fences, always moving, always alone. She didn't yet know his name, but she would learn. He was Tolan Yazi, half rancher, half Navajo royalty, and though he didn't know it yet, he had just hired the woman who would change everything. The mornings were always cold in the high desert, even in spring. Claire pulled on the borrowed wool sweater, the sleeves too long for her arms, and stepped into the barn with her hands already trembling. The cows stirred at the sound of her boots on the wooden planks, their breath visible in the chilled air, steam rising from their flanks like slow smoke from a dying fire. She'd never milked a cow in her life before coming here. The first day she'd fumbled with the pail and nearly gotten kicked in the chest by a nervous heifer. But she'd learned. By day 4, she moved like a shadow, gentle, quiet, patient. Each morning she found a thermos of black coffee waiting on the ledge near the first stall. No note, no voice, but she knew it was from him. He never said much. His name was Eli. He wasn't like any cowboy she'd seen in Kansas. No loud drawl, no jokes, no spurs clinking. He moved like part of the land, as if the wind passed through him instead of around him. He had the build of a man who worked the land, but the eyes of someone who had known ancient grief. He only ever spoke when necessary, when a calf needed pulling,
when a storm rolled in too fast, when the roof over the hay barn started to sag. And when she asked him, awkwardly, after 2 weeks, why he lived in a house far from the ranch hands, away from the other men, he simply said, "Some things aren't meant to be shared with strangers." Claire didn't ask again, but she watched. She watched how the horses followed him without reins, how the Navajo ranch hands nodded to him like he was more than a boss, more like a brother or a chief, how he sat cross-legged in the dirt some evenings, smoking a pipe with the old healer who came from the North Valley. Once she saw him kneel beside a sick mare in the dark, whispering in Navajo until the mare lay her head in his lap like a child. He never invited her to his world, but she was already drifting toward it. And perhaps he knew, because one evening, just as she was finishing the last pail of milk and about to clean the floor, he appeared in the barn doorway, his silhouette framed by twilight. "There's a mesa," he said, voice low, "past the ridge. My mother's bones rest there. I go every year. Tomorrow's that day. If you want to ride, you can." Claire froze, not just from surprise, but from the way he said mother, not as a word, but as a prayer. She didn't know why she nodded. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the ache in her chest that had started to feel less like Kansas homesickness and more like something this land was pulling out of her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not with hunger, but with history. Whatever it was, she saddled the gray mare at dawn the next day, heart pounding, hands raw from the chill, and followed him into the silence of the desert. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that this ride would change the shape of her soul forever.
The land changed as they rode. The red dust gave way to scattered stones, and the sky widened until it felt like they were riding inside a bowl of fire and silence. Claire had never seen a horizon so endless, so honest. The only sound was the rhythmic breath of the horses and the distant cry of a hawk cutting across the wind. Eli rode ahead, not once looking back, as if he trusted her to follow or not. It didn't matter. He didn't need her there, not really. And yet he had asked. Claire's legs ached from the saddle, but she didn't complain. There was something sacred in the way he rode, like each hoofbeat carried the memory of someone else. When they finally reached the mesa, she saw what the others never would. It wasn't just a place. It was a graveyard written in stone and wind. Small piles of rocks dotted the flat mesa top, each one different, some painted, some carved, some tied with sun-bleached cloth or eagle feathers. Eli dismounted slowly, tied his horse with care, then walked to a pile marked by a smooth turquoise pendant wedged into the rock. He knelt. No tears, no words. He sat for what felt like hours, the wind braiding through his long hair, the land holding him like a mother holds a wounded child. Claire stayed near the edge, watching. At one point, a gust of wind picked up the dust, and in it, she could swear she heard voices, not loud, not clear, but real. When Eli finally stood up, he turned to her and said, "This is where I remember who I am." She nodded, but he saw her confusion. "You think I'm just a rancher," he said, his voice low. "But my grandfather fought the cavalry right where we're standing. My mother sang me to sleep in Navajo when I was 5. They burned her school because she wouldn't stop speaking her own tongue." Claire's heart ached. She wanted to speak, to say I'm sorry, but the words felt useless. He didn't need her pity. He needed her to understand, and she was beginning to. As they rode back, the sun bleeding gold into the earth, Eli finally asked something of her. "Why'd you really come here?" Claire stiffened. No one had asked her that, not the way he did, not with eyes that could strip you to your bones. She hesitated. "I ran," she whispered. "My father died. My brother took everything, the house, the land, said women were too soft to hold a farm." She gripped the reins tighter. "I came west to find work, not to be saved, just to matter." Eli looked at her, long, quiet, unblinking. Then he said, "Then you came to the right place." And that was it. No comfort, no promises. But for the first time in months, Claire felt like her feet were touching something real. Not borrowed, not stolen, just real. That night, she found a woven blanket folded at her door. It smelled of cedar and horses, and of him. She wrapped herself in it and slept without waking, her dreams full of red mesas and thunderbirds. She didn't know it yet, but the land had started to claim her, just like it had once claimed him. And the prince of that land, silent, strong, and scarred, had just opened a door he hadn't opened for any woman since the war. Not even once. By late summer, the cows knew her scent. They followed Claire to the milking shed without a fuss, tails flicking lazily, hooves heavy in the dust. Her hands had hardened, her back strengthened, and the woman who once trembled at thunder now walked like she belonged to something older than fear. But it wasn't just the work that had changed her. It was Eli. He never hovered, never spoke more than necessary. And yet Claire found herself watching him like a reader clings to a book with missing pages. One day he'd be a stone, silent, distant, unshakable. The next, he'd fix the broken gate she hadn't told him about, or leave a small tin of salve on her shelf after seeing her hands cracked from cold mornings. Every kindness came like wind over desert rock, subtle, shaping her slowly. Then came the night of the fire. It was the last full moon of August, and the Navajo ranch hands gathered on the far side of the property, just past the riverbank, where sagebrush and pine met open sky. Claire had heard whispers all week, talk of a dance, of music, of remembering. Eli said nothing until the sun dropped. Then he appeared at her door and said simply, "Come if you want. Don't if you don't." She went. The fire was already roaring by the time she arrived. Drums pounded low and steady like a heartbeat deep in the earth. Figures moved around the flame, some laughing, some dancing, some just sitting with their faces tipped to the stars. Eli stood apart, leaning against an old cottonwood, his eyes reflecting fire and memory. A woman with silver hair took Claire's hand and pulled her into the circle. No introductions, no permission asked. Just rhythm. Claire moved slowly at first, clumsy in her boots, unsure of the beat, but the drums didn't judge, neither did the people. They just were, and so she was too. Hours passed like smoke, curling upward, fading into sky. She laughed for the first time in months, cried too when a young man sang a song in Navajo so sorrowful it made even the stars seem closer, as if they bent to listen. When Claire stepped away to catch her breath, Eli was there. "Your people dance?" he asked, voice like gravel in water. She smiled. "Not like that. We had Sunday church and polka halls. Mostly I just watched." He nodded, then added almost to himself, "You should dance more." They stood like that for a while, the fire crackling behind them, the scent of burning cedar thick in the air. Then Claire said softly, "Why me?"
Eli turned. Why what? Why let me stay? You didn't need another hand, and you don't talk to people like this. I see the way you keep distance like a weapon. He looked away, jaw tight. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Because you look like someone who was lied to." That silenced her. He went on, "And I've spent most of my life cleaning up the damage men do when they think they own things that don't belong to them. Land, language, women." Claire felt something rise in her throat. Anger, maybe. Grief. Recognition. "And you?" she asked. "I was almost one of those men. Until the war broke me. Then my mother died. Then I saw what was left, and I swore I'd never take what wasn't freely given again." The fire cracked behind them like thunder. He stepped back. "You don't owe me anything, Claire." She shook her head, voice trembling. "I don't, but I want to give something back." He met her eyes. Not with desire, but with reverence. The kind of look a man gives the sunrise after thinking he'd never see it again. They didn't kiss, not yet. But the space between them was no longer empty. It pulsed, and it waited. Because healing like theirs, slow, sacred, and full of silence, needed more than touch. It needed time.
Autumn came quietly, brushing the canyon walls with amber and gold. The mornings turned crisp. Wood smoke curled above cabins, and the cows grew thick with winter coats. Claire now moved through her days with the ease of someone no longer trying to escape herself. But even as the land softened into colder light, a question lingered. What now? She had come here with nothing, no plan, no roots, just scars stitched behind her ribs and a name she wasn't sure she could carry with pride. But now, things were different. She belonged to something. Not just the ranch, not just the rhythm of work and rest. She belonged to people who saw her, and to a man who never asked her to be anything but herself. Eli had remained steady through it all, present yet patient. He'd offer a nod across the barnyard, pass her a tin of coffee in the early light, listen when she spoke without trying to fix her. Never once did he use affection as a question. He waited, like the land waited for spring, certain it would come in its own time. One late afternoon, as she was mending a broken fence post near the eastern boundary, she heard a quiet rustling behind her. Eli. He didn't speak right away, just stood beside her, boots scuffing dry grass, hands tucked into the worn leather of his coat.
Then, gently, "I'm rebuilding the north cabin, the one by the creek. It needs a lot of work. Thought I'd turn it into something livable again." Claire wiped her brow, not looking at him. "You want help?" "I want you to have it," he said simply. She looked up. Her hands froze, fingers tightening around the wire she'd been tying. "What?" "Not as a gift," he said. "Not as payment. As invitation." Claire's throat went dry. Eli continued, his voice low and certain. "This land, it was my grandfather's. His father before him. They didn't own it. They belonged to it. Like I do. I think you might too, but only if you choose it. I won't ask again." He didn't say he loved her. He didn't need to. Because this was love. The kind that didn't rush or beg or demand.
the kind that simply stood still and waited to be met halfway. That night, Claire walked out to the cabin by the creek. Its roof was half caved in, the door crooked, windows long gone. But the foundation was strong. She stepped over the threshold, closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, imagined a future she could build, brick by brick, day by day. In the following weeks, they worked together on the place, replacing beams, setting glass panes, scraping paint from wood that smelled like memory. On the first frost of October, they slept inside for the first time. No heat, no furniture, just 2 blankets, a kettle, and a silence that didn't need filling. When morning came, Eli rolled over, looked at her like she was a part of the sunrise, and said softly, "You stayed." She nodded, smiling. "I'm not done dancing yet." And in that quiet cabin, surrounded by cedar and creek water, with cows lowing in the distance and snow just beginning to dust the ridges, Claire finally understood. This was not a story of escape. This was a return to a self that had always existed beneath the bruises, to a land that didn't care about past sins, only present steps, and to a man who, without a single promise, had given her the one thing no one else ever had, a place that felt like home.